Yes, that's right. I got my first passport at the age of 40, and then I took my first international trip and flew to Belize from Phoenix, Arizona. And a couple weeks before my flight was scheduled to leave, I that voice inside my head tried to talk me out of it, saying, "You got to be crazy going to this third world foreign country all by yourself. You should cancel." I thought, no, I'm going. 90 pesos would be about $5 US. So, yeah, just for a few dollars, you can go to a local pharmacy, talk to a doctor, and then go in and get your medications. And those are pretty affordable as well. But the thing that impressed me the most is how quickly I was able to get in, get seen, and get what I needed and get out the door, all within an hour. For every person who's worried about financing, their travels, sell your stuff. You're not going to need it. You're not going to want it when you move abroad. If there's something you really need to acquire, you can get it in the new country, most likely.
Hey everyone, Triston here for the Backpacker Society. Welcome to the show. As always, if you're new to the show or if you listened before, thanks for coming by and hanging out, and I hope you'll be inspired by travel today. If you're a single parent that's approaching an empty nest and considered incorporating travel into your lifestyle, or potentially even just starting over in a new country, then stick around because my guest and I today, we cover many tips and topics that can help build that lifestyle of your choice. Originally from Arizona, my guest today shares his story of being a single parent empty nester, starting to travel internationally at a later age, and now reinventing himself to build a life abroad. My guest today is Jason, and in our interview, as I mentioned, again, we talk about him being a empty nester. He shares his time in Guadalajara, Mexico, and some of his past adventures in Mexico as a whole. We talk about his journey to become a teacher abroad, more so for adults versus children, and overall, navigating the avenues that one must take if you're trying to build a life abroad, wherever it is that you go. On the back end, of course, I'll share more on the topics covered throughout the interview. But for now, let's roll into our interview with Jason.
So I saw as well, you recently came back to the US, to Arizona.
Yeah, I'm here for 2 weeks visiting. I'm actually in my mother's house in Mesa, Arizona, partly because I haven't seen her in almost a year. And also, hotels are really expensive in the United States. Massive sticker shock. I mean, a decent hotel room would set you back at least $100 a night. Multiply that
Yeah.
by
Well,
14 nights. That would be $1,400 I would have to spend on lodging. No, sorry, but no, not happening.
no, definitely can relate to that being in the States, or at least having traveled around the States at times, staying in hotels and whatnot. So I totally get you there. Yeah, you're kind
Yeah.
of so you said 2 weeks, and I know your plan is to go to Asia or to Vietnam specifically, right? Just gearing up
Yeah,
for that.
so I'm in Arizona 2 weeks. First 12 nights here in Mesa. I visited my son yesterday. I saw him for about an hour and a half for the first time since I left the United States in May of last year. So that was really nice. Um,
Mm.
and then my last 2 days here in Arizona will be in Tucson. I have a self storage unit there I need to access. And then on the 14th, I'm flying to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada for 8 nights. Never been to Canada before. And then after that, I'm on my way to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam to start looking for a job teaching business English in Vietnam, ideally Hanoi or Da Nang, somewhere up there.
Yeah, no, definitely good spots for sure. Just curious, since you brought up you said Vancouver, right? Like,
That's right.
did you just obviously you have some time? Did you just decide to take a trip? Maybe a flight made sense, or are you kind of
Yeah.
you have to the flights made sense to go from there and just decided to stay a bit longer?
I had never been to Canada. I thought to myself, well, Canada is sort of on the way to Vietnam because a lot of
Sure.
flights from the US to Southeast Asia are going to go up around Alaska and then down off the east coast of Russia. And then I'll have a short layover in Tokyo, Japan, and then on the way to Ho Chi Minh City. So it'll be a long trip, but I've never been on a long haul flight before. So this will be really something else.
Gotcha, and at least a little bit of break as well. So that makes sense.
Yeah,
Cool.
right.
I'm sure we'll talk a bit more on all the things you mentioned your son as well, which will actually come up a little bit here as well. But if you're ready, let's kind of get into it. But first
Yeah.
off, where's sort of your head at for this interview? I think you've have you done a podcast before, or is this sort of the first time really for you?
I've been interviewed before when I was in when I moved to Guadalajara, Mexico last year. I was working with a couple of business coaches, and they invited me over to their place and interviewed me about how I got to Mexico and what my plan was for my business and so on and so forth. That was a really fun interview.
Awesome, perfect. So not new to this at all. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So to kind of explain the things, obviously, first we'll start with getting to know you a bit more as a person, and then basically go from there. Cover some insight on your locations, then get to know you a bit more as a traveler, and then obviously get into your travel topic today. So, sound good?
Yeah. Wonderful.
Awesome. Perfect. So let's get into it. So first question, you seem to be into cycling, riding a hybrid bike and around places like the Chuck Huckleberry Loop in Arizona. So I'm curious for you, was that mostly a hobby or a form of exercise, or did you ever push it into more intense or longer rides?
I would say it was probably more of a hobby more than anything else. Tucson is a lot more bike friendly than Phoenix, Arizona, in my experience, and part of the reason I moved to Tucson 3 years ago was the fact that I was tired of Phoenix. I had been living in Phoenix for about 25 years, raised my son there along with his biological mother and his stepdad. I needed a break from Phoenix, and so Tucson, being just 2 hours away, made great sense. And then I had found out that this Chuck Huckleberry Loop was built there, and I said, "Wow, this loop is for bikes and pedestrians only. It goes around the entire city. I need to check this out." And so I got an apartment that was fairly near, situated fairly near this Chuck Huckleberry Loop, and I rode my bike a fair amount of time on there. Yeah, it's a nice aspect of Tucson. They're very yeah, it's a great thing. I have to say, but I didn't get into bicycling more seriously than that. No, no.
Fair play, and it makes sense. I know obviously it's a good pastime for sure. I've enjoyed a few rides in general, nothing crazy, but cool thing to do for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So next question. You also enjoy flying small planes from what I've saw. So I know you've flown a few Cessna Skyhawks and even gave your son, as you mentioned earlier, a flight experience as a gift when he was much younger. So I'm curious, what were those experiences like and what got you into flying in the first place? And also how was the journey with, getting a sports pilot certificate?
Well, you've definitely been doing your homework. I know we're friends now on Facebook, so that's really impressive research. Um, how did I? Well, the first question: how did I get involved in flying? Well, about 40 years ago, my dad got a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator for our computer, and so I was interested in that. Got a lot of experience flying around an electronic plane. And then I think it was 2000, yeah, almost 20 years ago, I took my first lesson. It was an introductory flight on a Cessna 172 Skyhawk. We flew out of Mesa Falcon Field, and that was a great deal of fun. Even if it was late June, there was a lot of turbulence because of the heat in Phoenix. It's the hottest time of year, but it was still a lot of fun. And I got into it a little bit, but it's expensive. I mean, even 10 and 20 years ago, I was paying about 100, 110, $120 per flight hour because you had to rent the plane and you had to rent the instructor too. So it's an expensive hobby. And so I never got a certificate. I had been interested, but being a single father, my son was still about 10. Well, he's 23 now. So he was still a young kid back when I was doing the tinkering around with flight lessons for fun things. So I had to put that on the back burner. And I haven't been on a small plane since, geez, I don't know, 2014, 2015, thereabouts. It's been probably at least a decade since I've flown anywhere as a private pilot. But still, I mean, a lot of fun. And all the instructors I've worked with have all said the same thing to me. I could tell you've been on Microsoft Flight Simulator because you're flying on instruments. And this is perfect visual flight conditions. All you got to do is look out your window, man. That tells you everything you need to know. Just look out the window. He says, I'm impressed though. You've only got just a handful of flight hours and you're already way ahead of most other people who are just starting out. So wonderful job there. But yeah, just look out the window. It's a metaphor for life. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. You actually brought up. I was gonna ask, but you brought it up as far as maybe the last time you flew. But I'm curious, especially now considering you mentioned, the flight simulator, Microsoft. Um, I guess how old were you when if you remember, how old were you when you did your first flight, or at least from the time that I guess you got introduced to it when you were young, as far as Microsoft Simulator. But
Yeah.
from that time to playing that game for the first time to then flying a plane yourself, like how long was that?
Okay. So my first experience with an actual real airplane, flying it as a student, was in June of 2006. So coming up on 20 years ago, I'm 51 now. So I was 30, 31 years old at the time. And my son was just a 3 year old kid or 3 or 4
Hmm,
years old. Yeah. So it's been a long
gotcha.
time.
Gotcha. super cool though. I mean, it's not every day you meet someone who can, or at least flown a plane here and there at times. So super cool.
Yeah.
uh,
Thank you.
uh, no problem. So you also mentioned that you have two patents, again, which is something else you don't hear every day. So as much as you're comfortable sharing, I'm curious, what were they for, and what problem were you trying to solve at the time?
Happy to help with that. Okay, so in the spring of 2015, so about 11 years ago, I was about to go to sleep and I said to myself, wouldn't it be nice to have your pillow pre cooled by the time you went to bed? That way you're not trying to fall asleep on a hot pillow. And so I went on Google Patents and did some quick searches. For context, at the time I was working as a patent research analyst for a private company based in Scottsdale, Arizona. So by that time, I already had about 4 years worth of experience in searching patents, and I very quickly found like a pre-cooled pill, like a liquid cooled pillow that had like a pump with pipes and circulating the cooling flow. I said, "Wow, okay, that's pretty sophisticated." So I can't invent this, and somebody else has already done it. So I went to bed. The next day, I thought, "Well, how about I make a pillow that's got like a built-in aromatherapy diffuser? That way, it spits out lavender, and you inhale it and you fall asleep that way." Sure enough, I found something that had a built-in fan and a reservoir to hold like lavender essential oil. I said, geez, okay, how about a pillow with speakers? And yep, there is a pillow with integrated speakers. I said, geez, okay, why don't I combine them all into one? A pillow with aroma diffuser, sound qualities, and maybe a special pillowcase fabric that draws heat away from your head and your neck. And I couldn't find that exact combination. I said, all right, now I'm on to something. So I said to my son, all right, we're going to do a little project together. I've got this foam pillow. We're going to build like a housing for it that kind of wraps around the pillow that's going to support the speakers on the side, and then behind you is the aroma diffuser. That way, the components have a place to go, a support, and then we could probably find on the internet somewhere, order a special pillowcase fabric that's going to cool you off. And so we were able to cobble this thing together. We got the wood from Home Depot or Lowe's and just built the housing around the pillow. Just picture a box without a top and without a front, and the pillow gets shoved in there. So that's kind of what we made. And now that I had it fully built, I took some photos, turned those photos into what looked like drawings, and then I figured out, how do I file a patent application. So I put together a provisional patent application at the end of March of 2015, filed that, and then within a year, I had to follow up with a non provisional. That's the real deal that the patent office will actually look at. See, the provisional is like making a reservation at a restaurant. Yeah, table for four. All right, we'll see you in a year. You get up to 12 months to explore the possibilities of marketing your product, which I didn't do. I just wanted to see, can I get a patent? And to my surprise, I did. I filed my actual patent application in March of 2016, and then in, I think, April of 2018, my first patent was issued, which was a really amazing thing. And right before that patent issued, I made a friend on LinkedIn. He was a patent agent. He found me, and we got to know each other. And he said, "Here, you actually have, the way a way to get a second patent, because you told me you added a strobe light. That's another feature. You can get a continuation patent on that." I said, "Oh, really? Okay, I didn't think about that. Great, thank you." So I filed a second patent application referencing the first one, and I'm adding one feature, a strobe light, which I built a separate mount for. You mount the strobe light like right behind the person's head. And so I filed my second patent application, got a second patent a year later. So that's the story. Was not able to make this thing a commercial success, especially being a single father on a very small budget. But I got two patents, and one expired, and the other one's going to expire sometime this year. And I'm not going to bother paying the expensive renewal fees. I'm going to be out of the country anyway. But
Sure.
yeah, ever since I was a kid, I was interested in patents, and I got not one but two.
So you bring something up there. So you said even as a kid you were interested in patent, excuse me. Um,
Yeah.
follow up. So follow up for that question. Where do you think? Oh, well, specifically, why so as far as that? And then where do you think that sort of problem solving spirit comes from for you?
I think it has to do with as a kid being interested in science, scientists, and when I went to college at the University of Arizona, I decided to major in engineering, and then after about a year, I decided, all right, well, what engineering? Material science and engineering, the science of selecting materials for a certain task. And so that's where that comes from. I've always been a nerd, and so makes sense that my in 2011 I got my dream job working as a patent analyst at that small company in Scottsdale, and I did that job for about 2011, 2020, I was laid off because of COVID. And then in early 2022, they called me back to work for them again as a 1099 independent contractor. And I did that job again for 3 years. So 9 and 3, 12 years experience searching patents.
That's awesome. And I'm
Yeah.
glad I'm glad you were able to get that dream job as well. I know obviously not many people um, are able to, so it's awesome that you did. Cool. All right. So next question. You also enjoy writing as well. I've seen that you've written articles online over the years, including lessons I've learned from Star Wars, which I'll come back to much later. We'll get into that, and then also 20 lessons learned in 20 years. So in that article specifically, you wrote, movies are interesting and a temporary escape. With books, I feel as though a part of me has changed after reading them. So I know like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and The Five Mistakes Every Investor Makes and How to Avoid Them are two books that shaped you specifically. But I'm curious, are there any other books that maybe have had a similar impact on how you think or live?
Yeah. Interesting questions. In fact, well, let's see. So right before COVID began in the U.S., I was learning about trauma, specifically childhood trauma and how it impacts an adult throughout his or her their lifespan. And I was going through that rabbit hole and figuring out, okay, my problems are much deeper than ADHD. This is like peeling away layers of an onion. And it was right around January of 2020, about a month before COVID hit the United States. I found a book by a guy named Pete Walker, and I forgot the exact title of the book, but it was life changing because I never went through a book so quickly. I mean, I read this entire 200 plus page book in 4 or 5 days flat. It was very transformative because I was reading a lot of horror stories about children, how they were abused and neglected, and it resonated with me. And I remember going through a couple of boxes of tissues going through this book, and it was an emotional experience. This is a type of book where I tape flagged at least half the pages of the book because they were very personally relevant. Yeah, even this was 6 years ago now. I still vaguely remember trying to take care of my kid who was in high school at the time, doing my job for the patent company, reading this book, and opening up parent Pandora's box. I don't know how I did all that. I had to really compartmentalize my brain, like just get your kid to school, come home, work. I was able to work from home, which was a really huge help because I was not in the shape to go to an office because I was just not myself. I was
Yeah.
undergoing a huge transformation, and I said to myself, "That book was so good, I can never read it again." That's pretty twisted to hear, but yeah, no. Pete Walker, one of the foremost authors in the whole space of traumatic childhoods and how they impact you decades down the line because it impacts you at a very deep level. And so,
Mhm.
a lot of people are, they're treating the symptoms. They have depression, they take antidepressants, they have anxiety, so they're taking anti-anxiety meds, or they have ADD, they're taking stimulants. A lot of these folks could benefit from a trauma screening and realize, okay, are you a Gen Xer? Okay, you were raised by boomers. You probably need help. So yeah, that was Pete Walker's, I think, complex PTSD, going from surviving to thriving. I think that's the title. I might be wrong, but yeah, Pete Walker. That's an easy name to remember. Definitely read his stuff if you're interested in those types of things.
So surviving to thriving potentially. We'll have to confirm the title, but thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that as well. I'm sure it could help a lot of people for sure.
yeah.
All right. So Uh, also, I should add, you also wrote in that article, find out what you stand for. Identify 3 to 5 core principles to live by. Fortune 500 companies do this, and so should we. So I'll ask you, what are some of the principles that you live by, considering that?
Wow. Over the years, I've been alive 5 decades, so values can change over time. I'll talk about most recently. I had a business coach a few years ago. He told me and his other students, unless you have like $10 million sitting in the bank, you're going to need to be hyper flexible to survive this new age that we're living in. Hyper flexibility. Yeah, I mean, if you want to leave the United States, you're going to need to be hyper flexible. You're going to be exposed to different languages, different food, different cultures, different ways of life, and you're going to need to roll with the punches instead of complain, well, this is not how we do it in the United States. Well, you left, brother. It's either adapt or go home. And so that's one thing. Hyper flexibility is very important. Also, recently, I turned down a job offer. In September, I applied for a job with the U.S. Patent Office. They had lifted their hiring freeze over the summer. I had been interested in working for them before, but shortly after the new administration took office, the patent office put a hiring freeze and they weren't hiring anyone. And so over the summer, they were able to get that lifted. And I said to myself, you know what? I had been in Mexico almost 4 months. I kept striking out looking for a job. And so I thought, well, let's see if I can get this job, move back to the US for a couple of years, earn some money, pay off my back taxes, and then get back abroad again. But I interviewed in September and October from Guadalajara, and then in November I started getting cold feet. I thought to myself, the more I think about this job, I'm having a very uneasy feeling I just can't shake. I wonder why I'm feeling this dread about returning to the U.S. to live and work in Northern Virginia and work for the U.S. government. It just seems to be that United States conditions keep deteriorating day by day. Things are just getting worse. I thought, okay, do I really want to work for this government? There was even an essay question on the application about which of the president's executive orders are most significant to you and how will you help implement them if you're hired. First of all, patent examiners don't get involved in executive orders. It's not a political position. So that was a values conflict, having to pledge loyalty to the president when it's not even about that. We're examining inventions to see if they're worth patenting or not. That's it. So
Yeah.
that was a red flag there, that question. That was optional, but so I declined to answer it. There's that, the feeling of this feeling of dread about, coming back to the US. That was something I couldn't ignore. Also, money is not the be all end all. There should be more than one reason you take a job. Compensation is important,
Sure.
but what else is there? I can earn money doing something else somewhere else. Um, the golden rule or the platinum rule, treat people how they want to be treated, not necessarily how you want to be treated. That's another value of mine.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's just it for starters.
Yeah. No, it's definitely relatable as well as far as just the general values. The hyper flexibility, like I love that a lot, especially when it comes to traveling and whatnot. So that definitely resonates with me. And then, as you said, treating others how not even necessarily how you want to be, but how they
Oh,
should be treated. So
yeah.
I value that one as well, actually, a lot. So very good points. Very good points. Okay. Lastly, for this section, in 5 words or less, describe your personality.
Compassionate, technical, zany, adventurous, brave. That's five
Awesome.
words, right?
You got it. I'm the dot.
Even
Zany, I like it too.
somebody even commented on one of my YouTube videos. They said you're brave in Belize. I'm all, okay, thank you. I'm not sure why they said that. I went horseback riding and I visited a pair of Mayan ruins. I didn't do anything unusual, but that was unpleasant surprise, I guess. Brave. Solo travel to a foreign country is kind of a brave thing to do. In 2015, I made my first international trip. I flew on my own to Belize. I spent 8 days in Belize on my own. And a couple weeks before my flight was scheduled to leave, I that voice inside my head tried to talk me out of it, saying, "You got to be crazy going to this third world foreign country all by yourself. You should cancel." I thought, "No, I'm going." And I had invited friends to go, but they didn't have the vacation time, and one of my friends thought Belize was near India. I said, "Oh no, and no, it's near Cancun, south of Cancun, silly." But I went on my own and I had a great time, no regrets at all. Went to Belize City for a couple of days, took the ferry a boat to Key Calker Island for a night, went on to San Pedro for one evening, and then I flew all the way west to the Cayo district and spent a couple of days in San Ignacio, and then made my way back towards Belize City for the return trip back to Phoenix. Yeah, it was a great first experience. I definitely recommend Belize as a first time visit for Americans because there's no language barrier. English is the official language there. And the currency in Belize is really easy. $1 is always two Belizean dollars. And US dollars are accepted everywhere in the country. So it's a very great soft launch for somebody who's never traveled abroad before.
hmm And I think it's cool because not many people really talk about Belize. We will cover more on Belize shortly for sure. But for now, let's transition into local insight with um I always kind of mess up saying the name of the place, but Guadalajara, Guadalajara, excuse me. So with there, of course, we'll talk a bit more about your connection with there. But for now, let's talk about different things to see and do there. I know obviously you moved there with the intention of living there long term, and you stayed overall for 5 months, right? So
Right.
again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But for now, let's get into things to see and do there.
All right. Wow. That's yeah, it's quite open question. I'll start with the food. It's a very foodie city. You of course got great Mexican food. Tequila was invented in the state of Jalisco, so you'll have some really good tequila there. The Mexican food is wonderful. You've got your American staples like hot dogs and hamburgers. That's easy. Plenty of pizza options. If you're really high end and if you have the means, there are Argentinian steakhouses in Guadalajara. There's even a Uruguayan restaurant that I saw on Google Maps but never got around to going to. Chinese food is there, sushi. There's a Mediterranean restaurant, like a Lebanese restaurant. Yeah, there's no shortage of food options in Guadalajara. You can go to a different restaurant every night for a full year and probably not cover every restaurant. There, it's very deep. The food culture there, lots of bars and clubs you can go to. There's a lot of nightlife in Guadalajara. It's a city of somewhere between 5 and 8 million people when you count the entire metropolitan area. Their public transportation is very robust and very affordable. You can pay 9.5 pesos, which is, I don't know, somewhere around 50 cents US. You can get on their metro light rail train and go from one end of the city to the other in a half hour. That's quite remarkably fast and efficient. The bus system, though, is very confusing. It's very easy to get on the wrong bus. I've done it many times. And if that happens, you just get off and you look on Google Maps. You go, okay, where do I go from here? And it's easy to find another bus to get on. So it's just the bus system is a bit tricky. It could be a bit more organized and more transparent, I guess. But now that if you have the means, if you're located near the light rail, definitely take the light rail. Uber is also plentiful in Guadalajara. Most of my trips around the city have been $10 or less. Traffic, you've got the big city traffic, but that's to be expected. So it's food and transportation. Healthcare is really good there. There are plenty of pharmacies. If you've got a common problem like maybe a sinus infection or a skin rash or an infection, or maybe you think you've got Montezuma's revenge, you can go into any pharmacy and pay 70, 80, 90 pesos or whatever to, they'll have a doctor right on site you could see without an appointment. He'll take your complaint. You're going to need Google Translate with you if your Spanish isn't very good, but they'll take your complaint, what's bothering you, and they'll give you some recommendations. And then you walk right into the pharmacy and get your prescription filled, or maybe you can get your meds over the counter. And you can do all that within an hour. No appointment required. It's very user friendly. That's your first line of defense is getting your health care. Go to the pharmacy. But if it's after 8 p.m., some pharmacies aren't 24 hours, some are. You can go to there's the Red Cross, which is only open during the daytime. The Red Cross is like urgent care. That's another great facility. But if you're out of options, if the pharmacies aren't available, if the Red Cross is not available, you can go to a public hospital. The disadvantage with that is it's a long wait. I went to a public hospital once and I waited about 4.5 hours before I got seen, but the care was good and I never got a bill in the mail. So yeah, and then also there's the private healthcare system. If you've got good insurance, you can go the private route and go to a private doctor or go to a private hospital, and that would require a payment up front and having an appointment arranged beforehand. I have a medical concierge in Guadalajara. Her name is Lori Payne, Payne. She runs a Facebook group, My Medical Concierge, and she will arrange the appointments for you. She got me an ultrasound appointment that I needed to have done. She helped me get blood testing done at a very nice clinic, and I paid for her services. And then I think it was about $30 for her to do the legwork, and for the appointment itself, for the ultrasound exam, was like $70 US, and you pay once. That's it. There's no copays, no co-insurance, no deductibles, no balance billing, none of the crap that you would find in the United States. That wasn't a thing in Mexico. You get the service and you pay what they tell you to pay. You can pay with physical paper cash or pay with your debit card. And that
Mhm.
was it. I said, wow, I'm astounded how transparent and easy the healthcare was in Mexico. It's really
Yeah.
amazing. And as far as social opportunities, yeah, even if Spanish is not your first language, it's only my second language. Socializing is rather easy there. There are meetup groups you can join, Facebook groups, WhatsApp has groups you can join. So making friends in Mexico, I find that to be easier than in the US. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I was sad that I wasn't able to get a job offer as an English teacher at the brick and mortar schools. They all wanted me to have residency first, but I didn't qualify. I don't have the income or the savings to qualify for residency in Mexico. So I maximized my 180-day tourist visa and left the country about a week before that 180 days came up. And I went to Belize for 4 weeks to pivot, to make my next plan. And then since I had never been to Guatemala before, it was an easy bus ride to get to Guatemala from Belize. And now I'm here
Totally
preparing to
makes
go to
sense.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Let's go back a little bit. So, well, first I'll kind of backtrack. But first, the visa, obviously that's visa on arrival, right? So you don't have to pay anything for the visa, and you get 180 days.
Right. Correct. For
Awesome.
Mexico, yeah, if you fly into Mexico, without any questions, they stamped my passport and wrote 180D, and that was my quote visa. It's there's a thing called FMM, which means Forma Migratoria Multiple, which is basically a tourist card. It's not a visa. It's a card. Typically, when you enter Mexico by land, you'll have to ask for an Forma FAMAMA, which means FMM form. You get that at the immigration office, either at the border, or if you drive into Mexico, there's an immigration office like 21 kilometers into the country where you have to pull into with your car, and you go in and you get your tourist card that way. And also, if you're driving in Mexico, you need to get Mexican car insurance. Your USA car insurance will not work in Mexico. And if you get into an accident in Mexico and you don't have the Mexican car insurance, you could be incarcerated because you'll be financially responsible for the damages on the spot. You're gonna have to pay cash on the spot to the other driver you injured or harmed their property. And if you can't come up with the cash, you're going to be taken away to jail. So you got to get Mexican car insurance while you're there, and then get the FMM card too as well. I like to do things by the book. It keeps you out
Got
of
you.
trouble.
Very good to know. Definitely, definitely true for sure. And then go back. I'm just going off some things you mentioned earlier. I know you mentioned it's about if you're at the pharmacy, it's about 70 to 80 pesos. Can you just give the
Exchange rate.
currency conversion to dollars? How much is
Sure.
that?
Well, it fluctuates daily, but I would say
Okay.
recently 17 or 18 pesos to one US dollar. So
There you go. So
mathematically, 90 pesos would be about $5 US. So yeah, just for a few
mhm,
dollars, you can go to a local pharmacy, talk to a doctor, and then go in and get your medications. And those are pretty affordable as well. Over the counter drugs, they're pretty inexpensive there. But the thing that impressed me the most is how quickly I was able to get in, get seen, and get what I needed and get out the door, all within an hour. It's
mhm,
just it's amazingly user friendly down there.
yeah. And I'll name some specific spots that you mentioned as well, as far as just general things with I don't know why it's
Guadalajara.
hard for me to say Guadalajara, but since you brought up a little bit about it sounds like obviously you did a visit to one of the local hospitals or I guess clinics there. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe like the quality? Because I think maybe there might be maybe people here in the States or wherever that maybe hasn't been overseas before, who maybe would go to somewhere like Mexico and think something like that maybe isn't the best quality in that sense, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, compared public hospitals to private hospitals are head and shoulders above the public system. They're better funded, much nicer facilities. So if you have good insurance, um, now if you're a visitor, you need to get travel insurance. If you're not a resident or a citizen of Mexico, you can't get the public health plan like IMSS or IMSABI. But if you're visiting, travel insurance, you can get travel insurance through Berkshire Hathaway. That was the plan that I had, Berkshire Hathaway Travel Protection. There's World Trips. Whatever plan you have, that should be able to get you into a private hospital, but you're going to need to have cash payment up front for whatever it is that your problem is. So that's a thing to be aware of. If you have a major medical emergency, that could be thousands of dollars you'd have to front to the private hospital. Where for me, yeah, I have money, but it's tied up in savings, and I can't just come up with the savings right on the spot. So I would prefer to be taken to a public facility if I had a major medical episode. It's a triage system, just like the United States. So if you've got like a heart attack or a stroke, you'd be moved to the front of the line. But if not, then you might have to wait a little while in the waiting room, which is fine. But the thing I noticed about the public hospital, the bathrooms weren't the greatest shape. There was no soap in the bathroom. So that was a concern of mine. If you're traveling, it's a good idea to have your own hand sanitizer or bring your own wet wipes while you travel. That's not a bad idea. A lot of people carry sling bags, so that's a great place to store a little bottle of hand sanitizer. So that way, if the facilities you're at don't have soap right there, okay, well, fine. You could use hand sanitizer. Medicated wet wipes are a good idea and very portable, obviously. Um, Yeah, the public hospitals, they left a little bit to be desired. I mean, the United States has better public hospitals, better funded, but at the end of the day, you're going there to get help. I was able to get the help I needed. The staff in the public hospital did speak pretty good English, so that was nice. Um, but yeah, I was able to get the diagnosis I need, and they wrote me the recommendations. And so the following morning, I went to a pharmacy and got the meds that I needed. So it was still a success story, regardless.
Cool.
Does
Thank
that
you
answer
for
your
that.
question?
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. Talk a little bit about the local beer culture. Cerveceria Gibbons.
Cerveceria Gibbons, or yeah, Cerveceria Gibbons. Yes, Cerveceria means beer brewery, and Gibbons, really great place. Very good staff, many of whom spoke English. Not all of them, but some did. Very nice, welcoming place. The ambiance was nice. They had like vines growing around, and they had a really decent beer selection. The house beer was the Gibbons Light was very nice, and there were some other beers that were really high alcohol level, and there was a really good too. I was part of the English speaking business networking group. It was a WhatsApp group, and also he also had, I think, a presence on a page on Facebook or a group on Facebook. But WhatsApp was the way I found out about it, and they would meet every Wednesday night at like 6 p.m. And I was a pretty regular. I was there pretty regularly, and they got to know me pretty well. Um, we didn't talk too much about business. It was more of a social outlet, but we did have occasional business presentations. And one of the members invited me to a BNI meeting, and he wrote down a thing for a script for me to read out in Spanish for the BNI meeting. So I said, "Well, this is a first. I'm not new to BNI. I went into a BNI meeting in the U.S. before, but not in Mexico, and that was a pretty fun experience. Even though I couldn't really understand the majority of what was being said, I was just kind of following along, and I gave a great presentation. I read my Spanish statement, and some folks were seemed to have some interest in what I had to say. And my friend after me said, "You nailed it. You did a great job. No problems." My problem was, though, that without residency, I wasn't able to launch my business. I had tried to get an English teacher job, and when that didn't work out, I said, "How about I start a business as a consultant, offering technical and legal English consulting to local businesses?" But trouble is, as a tourist, I wasn't able to get residency. Without residency, I couldn't get a work permit. Without a work permit, you can't get a tax ID number, and I wouldn't be able to invoice businesses locally. So I offered my services pro bono, but that never got anywhere, and I had to leave Mexico before the 180 days was up. But
Got you. And I know,
still a
yeah,
good,
sometimes
still a nice
I know
experience, though.
very good. I know sometimes with that too, trying to start a business abroad, it's a lot of this red tape, so to speak, and a lot of things you really have to figure out beforehand, or that kind of gets in the way. So, but hopefully in time, yeah, if that's something you want to do, you can figure that out and kind of go from there.
Yeah,
Talk about a little bit more as far as like your daily life while you were there, because again, you were there for the 5 months or 6 months.
five
And you
months.
mentioned
Yeah, 5 months.
you mentioned specifically the Avenida Chapultepec. However you say it. It's hard.
Oh,
I don't speak Spanish.
Avenida Chapultepec. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I wasn't too into the nightlife, at my age, 51. Plus, wasn't interested in dating. I said to myself, don't know what my future looks like. I'm not looking for a relationship, not for a long time. I wasn't even casually dating anyone either. That was just way out on the back burner. I've been operating in survival mode for the past 9 months, living out of a suitcase. Even when I was in Guadalajara, I said, well, look, unless I get a job, I don't have any long term roots here. I need to be prepared to up and leave. Um, when I get to Vietnam, my goal will be getting a teaching job there, either teaching business English or IELTS test prep. IELTS is the International English Language Testing System. It's a standardized test for people who want to move to an English speaking country or go to university in an English speaking country. So I got a certificate in being a test prep coach for that exam. That's going to open up some more options for me because IELTS prep is huge in Vietnam. So this will be a good idea to get this certificate. That way, I'll have more options available to get a job. And once I get a job, and I've been doing a job, and I've been in the local community for a year or more, then I'll look into restarting my consulting business and maybe getting corporate clients that way. And that way, I could really increase my options, increase my income, and yeah, dating might be more a feasible option. Once I've been at a place long enough and have roots to a country. But as a nomad, I'm finding that to be, yeah, that's kind of really a hard thing to do. So that's, yeah, down the road.
No, yeah, to hit on that a little bit, just from the side of having moved around a lot myself. I know, like more recently, I've stayed based. I'm in Texas now currently, but um,
Hmm,
recently I was in Bangkok for the last 2 years. So as far as
hmm.
you mentioned, obviously the dating side and all those other things, like definitely it's easier when you're kind of rooted in one place more so. But uh, just talking to me a little bit, definitely intentionally when I was moving around a lot more. So maybe the longest I'd ever stayed at one place at a time up to that point was like if I wasn't working and just focused on that, like maybe, a couple months at a time. So to your point, it definitely can be trickier if, to kind of lay those roots, if that makes sense for sure. So I can totally
Yeah,
relate with that. Um, all right. So as far as Guadalajara, there we go.
there you
Um,
go.
did you have anything else you'd like to add as far as specific things to see and do there, or are you ready to move on?
Well, I would love to live there again if the opportunity presents itself. In fact, there was a guy who commented on one of my videos on my YouTube channel. He said, it's too bad we didn't get to meet. I would have liked to help you when you were in Guadalajara. And he said, offered me a place to stay. And I'm thinking, who is this? I have no idea who this person is. They're offering me a place to stay. That's a little bit odd. But then he sent me an email through my website and he added some more context. He says we went to the same school, ITTO in Guadalajara, for getting the English teaching certificate. And he's been a teacher for about 20 years. I was like, oh, okay. So that's what he means by helping me out. He's also a teacher. He could have maybe helped me get a teaching job. And he works for the University of Guadalajara. I'm like, all right, okay, now I'm connecting the dots. So we've been emailing back and forth. I think he's living in or around Lake Chapala, which is about an hour south of the city. But honestly, yeah, if I had the opportunity, I'd love to live in Guadalajara again. I have a lot of great things to say about the city. Um, I found that assimilating to Mexico was easier than I thought it was going to be because I have a decent working knowledge of Spanish. I'm a B1 level, which is lower level intermediate. Basically, I have the language skills of an 8 to 10-year-old child. Good enough to be understood. I have a very hard time understanding the spoken word. That's challenging. I wish people had subtitles across their chest whenever they spoke. Um, it's not hard to find a Spanish class there. There's plenty of Spanish classes. I was taking one for a little while. I was even this place called Bar Cafe Sentido. I think that's the name of it. It's right in the heart of Guadalajara. It's like a multi-level facility. They've got like a bar on one floor, another floor there's a kitchen. They had language exchange meetups there. So if you're living in Guadalajara for any length of time, go to a language exchange meetup. There are people who want to learn English. You're going to want to learn the local language, so that's a great fit. There are other places to learn Spanish. And it's not very expensive either. You could easily pay for this out of pocket. So definitely, if somebody wants to live in Guadalajara for a decent length of time, learn Espanol. It will definitely help you out there. Great city altogether, very beautiful neighborhoods. I was living in Colonia Americana, which is one of the hippest neighborhoods in the world, I'm told. It's got a very good reputation. There's also Santa Tere, there's Providencia. Those are three of the nicest neighborhoods in the city of Guadalajara. There's obviously places you don't want to live. There's some areas that are dangerous. You got to learn to vet the city and learn where not to live as well as where to live. But yeah, I have a lot of great things to say about Guadalajara. It's a great place. It's the third largest city in Mexico. It was the second largest. Now Monterrey has taken over as the number two spot. But Guadalajara is referred to as the Silicon Valley of Mexico. It's got a lot of high tech industry there. A lot of corporations are headquartered there or have a big presence there. So great place. I give it 5 stars.
Awesome. And actually, I do have a follow-up question before we do transition, because you mentioned like much earlier as far as being able to easily meet people there or network. How did that even like? So you mentioned like a WhatsApp group and things like that. How did you even find out about that initially? Just obviously meeting people through hostels, maybe, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how I found the English speaking business networking. It might have been on Facebook or it might have been through WhatsApp. It's funny when you've been with a group for a long period of time and you kind of forget, how did I find this group? Oh, I don't remember. Happy accident. It could be. could be coincidence. It could be through somebody. There's many avenues to find groups. Meetup.com, Facebook, WhatsApp. Those are probably three very good routes to finding your circle, to put it
Definitely makes
succinctly.
sense.
Yeah.
Definitely makes sense. All right, so let's transition now. So obviously we got to know you earlier more as a person overall. Now we're gonna get to know you more as a traveler. Before going into questions and everything, just to kind of give a general list of the places you've been or areas you've been. So obviously Mexico, Guadalajara. You've been a
Mhm.
lot of Mexico actually, and as you said, you gave Guadalajara a 5. Mexico, you know pretty well as well. I know you've
Yeah.
been to like Puerto Vallarta. You can name a few places specifics as far as Mexico, if you like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Guadalajara, I have the most direct experience with. In the summer of 2024, when I went to school to get certified as an English teacher, I was in Guadalajara 8 weeks that time. And then when that was over, I took the bus to Puerto Vallarta, spent a week there. And then after that, I took the bus to Mazatlan and spent a week there before returning to Arizona at the end of the summer of 2024. So 10 weeks in Mexico in 2024, 8 Guadalajara, one each in Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan. Other places I've been, a weekend in Hermosillo, Sonora. That's the state south of Arizona. It's not very popular. I've been to Ensenada, Baja California about 10 years ago, a long time ago. I did a cruise excursion where one of our ports was Cabo San Lucas, and Puerto Vallarta was the other port. This was in 2017. Most recently, last year, I went to a business conference in Mexico City, Mexico. That was a really good time. I got in for free. So that was all the motivation I needed to take the bus to Mexico City and then back. I definitely recommend bus travel in Mexico. They're very clean. They're very roomy, spacious. They're comfortable, much more comfortable than being on an airliner. Um, the buses have Wi-Fi, although when I went, the Wi-Fi wasn't working. But if you've got a cell phone data plan, you're fine. But yeah, the bus travel in Mexico is very comfortable and quite inexpensive as well. I My round trip from Guadalajara to Mexico City and back was about $110 US for the whole trip. So
Yeah,
pretty well priced. There you've got high end buses and you've got more economically priced buses. So it depends on your budget. But yeah, if you have the time, bus travel is a great way to see the country. Yeah, when I was leaving Mexico, I flew from Guadalajara to Cancun for the purpose of taking the Tren Maya to exit Mexico. The Tren Maya is their relatively new electric train that goes around the whole Yucatan Peninsula. So I took about a 5 hour ride from Cancun down to Chetumal. Chetumal is the southernmost major city in the state of Quintana Roo on the eastern side of the country that borders the Caribbean Sea. And so that was a very nice train ride. It went pretty fast. It was very nice and comfortable and modern. And then after the train ride was over, I got a ride to a border town called Subteniente Lopez, which bordered Belize, and then spent a night there at the hotel. And then crack of dawn, or actually before dawn, I walked to the border enter Belize. And after an hour of waiting, the military troops that were guarding the border told me, "No, you need to take a cab. This is only for entering Mexico. You can't exit Mexico on foot." I said, "Oh, really? Oh, okay." So they got me a cab to drive me into Belize. So
hmm,
seen lots of Belize, seen lots of Mexico as far as Belize is concerned. I had told you earlier that my first trip to Belize was in 2015. So I this time around I entered Belize for the first time in 10 years. It was a nice homecoming. I entered by vehicle, got a cab ride to the town of Corozal in the northern part of the country, and then I boarded a bus that took me to Belize City, and then I switched buses to take the bus to San Ignacio town, which is in the western district of the Cayo district. San Ignacio has about 20,000 people. So for Belize, it's a fairly large city. It's not a city. It's a fairly large town. It's a very touristy area because a lot of people will go cave tubing. They'll go to the Mayan ruins of Calpec and Zunantinich, which is what I did. I stayed in one hostel for 4 weeks. It was Bella's Backpackers Hostel. It was actually a hostel in a treehouse. They literally built a hostel around a large tree. It was really amazing. Had four different floors, decent Wi-Fi, great people. They served breakfast every morning. I got to meet people from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, a few from the United States, many Germans, a couple Swiss people. So yeah, very international distant destination. Yeah, Belize. I mean, the primary language is English, so that's a huge draw. And after I had left Belize, I took a 16-hour bus overnight from San Ignacio all the way to Antigua in southwestern Guatemala, and that was a Guatemala. That was a very epic journey. So yeah,
Hmm.
I've been around a lot.
It's amazing. It must have been a very large tree. You said 4 floors as well. That's crazy.
Yeah, this is a
Pretty cool
huge
though.
tree with a huge tree trunk. They literally just built around the tree. Pretty spectacular. Definitely, I definitely would go back to Bella's Backpackers Hostel.
Yeah. And I wanted to add real quick. I know you mentioned obviously taking a bus around in Mexico. I've done the same as well. I actually took it from Mexico City to Texas. So back in the US to San Antonio. Uh I forget, maybe definitely an overnight, 12 hours at least, maybe 16. But
Easily.
as you said,
Yeah.
very comfortable. I know it sounds like a lot for sure, but very comfortable, very easy. Obviously, we did a lot of stops as well, so you can refresh and everything. So buses in general, I think in Mexico, and then even just that region in general, um, very easy to do, and as you said, very comfortable to do as well. So definitely look into it if you ever go to Mexico or that region overall. Um, cool. So now, Ted, you mentioned it a few times already as far as Belize, but take me back to September 19th, 2015, when you did that that real solo trip, as you said, to Belize. I know at that time you were 40 or so around that time, and you said you just got your first passport at that time as well.
Yes, that's right. I got my first passport at the age of 40, and then a few months after I got the passport, I took my first international trip and flew to Belize from Phoenix, Arizona.
Hmm. So
Yeah, it
now,
was,
what pushed you? I think you said as well you had been before, but overall for now for this trip, and obviously doing your first time solo, what pushed you to finally take that trip? And then I guess why Belize in particular as well.
it was International Living magazine. I had been a subscriber to that magazine, and through that publication, I learned about this tiny country of Belize. I never would have found out about otherwise. I mean, they advertise it very well. Imagine a small country that's Caribbean, but without the Jamaica or U.S. Virgin Islands or British Virgin Islands price tag. A lower cost country, English is the first language, and you can get there in a single day. I thought, wow, really? I need to visit this place. So it's what prompted me to get my first passport and go to Belize. So yeah, it's a great magazine, International Living.
Awesome. Cool, cool. Okay. And then even before that, let's go back a bit more. I think you had mentioned it as well. Um, Before then, your only foreign travel was you mentioned an overnight in Mexico back in 1995.
Right, right,
So
that's
then
right.
So then, of course, then nothing for until 2015. So 20 years, nothing as far as at least foreign travel.
Correct.
Why do you think? I mean, obviously, I know you had a son and everything, but why do you think travel didn't really enter your life until much later?
Yeah, like as you said, my son was very young. By the time I flew to Belize, my son was already 13 years old, so he was a little bit older, and his mother and stepfather were in a position where everything was okay for me to leave the country for even a week. But before that, apart from being the father of a young child, I did a lot of domestic travel. Las Vegas, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Flagstaff, Arizona, Southern California. That's where most of my trips were. Colorado in 2012. So I was perfectly satisfied with all the domestic travel I had been doing when my son was young. I was easily in a position to take him on a road trip to like Tucson or Flagstaff or even Southern California. We went in when he was I think when he was 12, we went to Legoland in Southern California. When on his 8th birthday, we flew all the way from Phoenix to Portland, Oregon, and rented a car to go to Astoria for the 25th anniversary reunion of the Goonies movie. That was um, that was an amazing father and son journey because he loved the Goonies. That was my childhood movie. So I said, well, we're going to go and experience the Goonies, the two of us, for about a week and a half. I think it was about a week or so. Yeah, flew to Portland and then rented a car to go to Astoria. We actually, we got a hotel reservation and then we actually took a tour of the Goonies film locations together. He was just 8 years old. That was my birthday gift for him. And so, yeah, in the United States, there's a lot of obviously you have a lot of domestic travel options in a country as large as the United States. You can even go to Alaska, Hawaii, or Puerto Rico without a passport. And so,
Hmm.
in the U.S. Virgin Islands, you don't need a passport. Guam, even. I mean, U.S. 50 states and a bunch of international, a bunch of territories that are outside the mainland country. So you could travel a lot in the U.S. without a passport. But thanks to International Living Magazine, I said, you know what, it's time for me to get a passport and go abroad. And so I'm glad that I did.
Awesome. And as you said, very true. There's definitely still I like even me, I haven't really traveled a lot within the US. I don't want to talk much about me, but I used to work on cruise ships, so that's really what's brought me around the States, anything I've done in the US side. But it's still very, like you said, very much a lot to see as well. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be about the foreign travel as long as you move around in some point for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
let's talk about you mentioned obviously your that cruise you did to Mexico around 2016. So um you did an excursion to Ensenada, you mentioned that really got you hooked on Mexico. What was it about that experience that kind of flipped the switch for you?
You were reading the about section of my homepage. Very good. Yeah. So yeah, it was I think on or around somewhere around March 5th or March 6th of 2016. So in a month it'll be 10 years since that cruise. I was involved with a woman at one point. I said, you know what, this group that I'm involved in is taking a cruise to Ensenada, Baja California. That sounds like an epic time, and it's only for a few days. So yeah, we drove to Southern California, the was it the LA area, and then joined my friends at the cruise port, and then it was a Carnival cruise, and the first stop was supposed to be Catalina Island. We were going to take a tender boat from the ship and go to Catalina Island for a day's excursion, go snorkeling maybe, and some sightseeing. And I had been to Catalina Island twice before. I think it was in 2007 I went to Catalina Island, and again in 2013 with a different group. So I was looking forward to coming back to Avalon and the island, but unfortunately, the seas were too rough for tender boats, so they had to cancel that excursion. And so we're actually watching Catalina Island drift away in the distance as the cruise ship kept on going. I'm like, man, that's really disappointing. I was looking forward to Catalina Island. And she's like, yeah, I know, but at least we're getting a refund on the excursion that we bought and couldn't use. So
Yeah.
we continued on the sea and made it to Ensenada a day or two later and got off the ship. I said, wow, okay, this is something else. This is beautiful. Ensenada is very Mediterranean climate. The architecture is very beautiful. You've got the Southern California architecture. The weather was beautiful. I think it was March 9th is when we landed. We arrived in Mexico and an entire day. And my girlfriend got us some tickets to go see La Bufadora, which is like a blowhole. Literally, water will come in. It's like a geothermal, hydrothermal vent. Water comes in and shoots up and it makes a whole display. It's definitely a good tourist attraction. So we took a bus to go down to La Bufadora, south of Ensenada. And as we're going, we're traveling through, I'm like, babe, I feel like Jason Bourne. We're traveling internationally. I'm thinking I could live here. I like this place. I'm all right. I'm putting Ensenada Baja on my list of places to consider living in Mexico after my son grows up. So that was a nice day in Ensenada. It was just a day excursion. And then we got back on the ship and back to the States. A year later, a friend of mine, Kevin, we took a road trip from Phoenix to Southern California for the Carnival cruise. It was a meetup group that did this time. This was a 6 day cruise from L.A. area to call of the first port of duty or the first port stop was Cabo San Lucas. So it took several days going down the Baja coast, that was a very nice experience. So we got off the ship at the Cabo San Lucas, quickly got on a bus to go for a horseback riding excursion up the coast on Baja. So that was nice, riding the horse on the beach in Mexico. And that was a very quick excursion. We had to get back in a hurry to get back on the ship. And then the next morning, Puerto Vallarta, very different climate. This is tropical, where Cabo San Lucas is where the desert meets the sea. So we got off at Puerto Vallarta and then we took the bus to another horseback riding excursion. This time we were horseback riding in the jungle, and that was a lot of fun. And then got back to Puerto Vallarta, had dinner there, and then got back on the ship to go all the way back to California, which took a couple of days. I've been on two Mexican cruises, both very enjoyable.
Awesome. Real quick with Puerto Vallarta, because again, I used to work on ships. Would you stop right in front of or right by that Walmart there? You know what I'm talking about? Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, yeah. I do remember seeing a Walmart on the bus. Yeah, from the bus.
Yeah.
Exactly. A Walmart and maybe a Costco. Yeah, Mexico's got all the big box stores.
Yeah, yeah. I just have to shout out Puerto Vallarta real quick because say like on the ships, we would go and then we would just stop right there and then for forever I just thought, okay, So I guess there's just only a Walmart. Why are we right here? But anyway, eventually one time, at one point, I decided to actually explore Puerto Vallarta, got in the the center and everything, and it's super nice. So for anyone, if you ever do a cruise or anything like that, and you see, because literally, at least for where we would stop, literally you just look out the window and Walmart is right there. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of different ports where sometimes it's just really like that aren't much to it, but Puerto Vallarta definitely has a lot to it. So
Mhm.
maybe that was just me kind of judging a book by its cover, at least from what we saw, if you will. So just be mindful of that if you ever go to Puerto Vallarta. But let's move on there. Um, so you mentioned, of course, going back to Guadalajara for a bit, obviously going out there to do your TEFL, and wanted to stay there long term. But overall, you stayed 10 weeks there. So I'm curious and obviously before that, you did shorter trips. Um,
Mhm.
what was that experience, or what did that experience rather teach you at the time that maybe short trips did not, or things you did before did not?
Okay, so with reference to Guadalajara, my very first trip there was in September of 2022. My then business coach, the guy who's advised guys like me to be hyper flexible, he was having a seminar in Guadalajara. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm interested in Guadalajara. It's a very big city. I want to meet my business coach in person and thank him for what he's taught me. And so I took a flight from Phoenix to Guadalajara for a weekend there. I had a friend who was living there already. My friend Tanya, she was already living in Guadalajara, so we made plans to meet up after my seminar was over. I went to the seminar and took a day class there. Um, and yet, even in just one weekend, given my experience with the seminar, meeting my friend and going to a dive bar together, and then being on my own, I went to Lake Chapala the following day and turned 48 in Guadalajara at Lake Chapala. I went on a boat excursion. We went out on the lake on a boat. And then on the following Monday, I flew back home to Phoenix. And I thought to myself, you know what? I had a fantastic weekend there. People understand my Spanish. That city has a lot of potential. I could definitely see myself living in Guadalajara. So 2 years later, I decided to go to school, and I was in Guadalajara 8 weeks, 5 weeks in school, plus another 3 weeks just sightseeing and taking the train and exploring the city, looking around. I made a friend there. So yeah, so a weekend, and then 2 years later, an 8 week um, stint, and then the following year, a 5 month stint in Guadalajara. So I've got a lot of experience living in Guadalajara, and so I learned a lot. When you're there for an extended period of time, you try your best to live like a local, eat where the locals eat. Try to stay out of big chains. Neat thing about Guadalajara, they got not only the big box stores like Walmart and Costco, but plenty of mom and pop places to shop. So I always do my best to shop local, eat at local restaurants, shop at local stores. There's plenty of tiendas where you could buy anything from fruit to furniture to everything in between. Um, and then obviously make friends with local people. Don't just have expat friends or gringo friends. Try to befriend locals and speak their language. A lot of kids learn English in Mexico. From what I understood, at seventh grade and up, they're required to learn English in public school. So I learned that when I was a student at ITTO, my old school, to get certified. So I said, really, I did not know that. So yeah, a decent number of English speakers in Guadalajara, but you can't rely on English as a crutch. You've got to learn the local language. But shop local, eat local, befriend local people. You can do all those things even in a month. You don't need 5 months to do it. You could do it in a month. So those are the things you'll learn as like somebody who wants to be a wannabe local versus just a weekend. It's a night and day difference.
Definitely. Now, now obviously going last year, 2025, you did more of the slow travel, which you mentioned already, right? Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, months at a time. So what would you say was different, or what did you learn from doing that slow travel overall compared to anything you did before as well?
Okay, so what I've learned was I'm very capable of living out of a suitcase. I've got like three of them. My huge green Navy sea bag. I used to be in the service, and so I've got a sea bag that holds pretty much my whole travel wardrobe, plus a few other things. And I got two backpacks, one backpack to keep my laptop in and my electronics, and another laptop for things like books and things like that, books and papers. But yeah, I found I'm more flexible and resilient than I thought I was. I was able to give myself the fighting chance to be that person, to be that guy living out of a suitcase and slow traveling around. What I'm not is I'm not a backpacker. I definitely don't fit the backpacker mold. I've got a huge backpack, three of them, but I like to stay put for weeks at a time, months at a time, if possible. I don't want to move around continuously. I met a lot of people who are in their 20s and 30s who are at the hostel for one night and then they move on. I'm like, wow, do they go to a different hostel every night? How do they get around? Do they hitchhike or they? It's a very interesting and different lifestyle from what I'm used to. I'm a slow traveler for business. I'm doing business on the road. I'm in the business of looking for jobs, in the business of applying for jobs, in the business of networking and handling all the logistics of getting my teaching credentials ready for Vietnam. That was a huge ordeal that I had to undertake on my own and figure it out on my own. So that definitely contradicts being an constantly on the move backpacker. That would have just been next to impossible for me to pull off. One, I'm a bit old, and two, I'm doing business. I don't want to keep moving every day and doing getting used to a new Wi-Fi router every single day. Sorry, but that's not for me. That might be for younger people, my son's age, but not this guy.
No, it is, and it definitely is very different. And I think it's important, obviously, with just your goals and obviously anyone else's goals, whatever their goals are. Moving around a lot might not lend to it versus being able to be in one place, slow down a bit, get familiar in general with the place, and get into your routines basically. So definitely a
Yeah,
great point.
absolutely.
Um, let's so this next question will kind of be a soft transition to our travel topic, which will be uh being a single parent empty nester and traveling on the road, whether it's you're a digital nomad or whatever it be. But for you, you mentioned in 2022, when your son turned 20, you came up with the concept of Spend, which is your website and sort of your mission to help people in that position to travel. But Spend standing for single parent and empty nester digital nomad. So um, so the moment when your son, left the home, left the house, I guess you went to college or whatnot, I believe. But was that the
Yeah.
moment, or when was the moment when travel kind of shifted to being something that you just do to something that you saw as a possible lifestyle for yourself? If that makes
It was
sense.
back in yeah, it was back in 2022. My son turned 20 and I bought the domain name thespendchannel.com. I bought that domain to prepare starting this personal brand. 2022 was the year I had started my own business and was wanting to become a location independent entrepreneur. And so my son had turned 20. I said, yeah, the time is going to come where we go our separate ways. And so in early 2023, my son was supposed to go to college, but he changed his mind at the last minute and did something else. And to make a long story short, he moved back in with me a month later when I was in Tucson, and we lived together up until the summer of 2024 when I told him, I'm going to school for the summer. You could get your own place or rent this place after I leave. And so he chose that option. But yeah, so the seeds were planted 3.5 years ago already. In summer 2022, bought the domain name. Um, at the end of school, after I graduated with my TEFL certificate at the end of July 2024, I launched my YouTube channel and put up a few videos of my time in Guadalajara, even though they weren't really YouTube friendly videos. It was just some content to put up on the channel, just to start,
Sure.
to start the process, to make the journey start, to get the ball rolling. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, in the summer 2024, so in 2022, I bought the domain name, didn't do much with it. But 2 years later, I started the YouTube channel, and then I had started a website in I think it was the spring of 2025. In 2025, I started a website and started to get that process going, and in early 2025, I hired the business coaches to help me with my YouTube channel, get my YouTube channel going, and get my personal brand established. And I worked with these coaches for a few months and then decided not to work with them anymore after a while because I had to focus on getting a job. I thought, you know what, I'm going to put the personal brand and the YouTube on the back burner. I really need to get focused on getting a job. That's going to take precedence. And so that's kind of how the journey of the Spend channel unfolded. And just the acronym Spend sounded perfect. I could have tried single parent, empty nester, remote worker, but that would have been Spenru. That doesn't make sense. Or single parent, empty nester. I mean, just Spend sounded perfect. So it was available domain name. So I said, oh, let's go with it. So that's the story of that.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, so we will transition now into our main travel topic. So being an empty nest single parent abroad, or we're trying to work towards that. But before we fully move on, is there anything else you'd like to add, as far as just your travels and whatnot, or are you ready
Yes,
to move
I'm glad you asked that because I thought of a point I wanted to make. When you're making reservations at a hostel, hostels are a great way to lower your lodging costs, mainly because it's shared housing. And you're in a bunk bed with several other people, or maybe a dozen other people, shared bathrooms, but that's what keeps the cost low. The advantage of that is that you're not lonely. You get to meet people from all around the world, make some friends that way, or some acquaintances. Things that you have to deal with. Yeah, shared space, shared bathrooms. That's the downside of it. But to me, the pros outweigh the cons. But one important logistical note: definitely read reviews of the hostel. If you're on hotels.com or hostelworld.com or agoda.com, booking.com, there's a lot of different ways to reserve hostels. Look at the photos, read the reviews, and reserve a hostel for 1 week. Give it a try. If your first week goes fine, then good. Extend that reservation for the remaining time that you're planning to be in that city. So that's something I learned the hard way because when I went to Guatemala, I was just shopping on price and I reserved a place, hostel, spa, and relaxation house. And when I arrived, the van drove off after I paid him his tip. I've got my 60 pounds worth of luggage. I go to knock on the door. Sign says, "We've moved." Oh, you mean it's not there? Okay, great. I'm in a new city I've never been in. I've got all this luggage. I've got to find where this hostel actually is. And so I looked up the address and I walked about, I don't know, a kilometer maybe to find this address. And when I knocked on the door, it's like, is this even a hostel? What is this place? I think it was a travel agency. I'm like, great. I've got nowhere to stay and I've got all this luggage. So I had to go to a restaurant and then message the hostel owner on WhatsApp, say, hey, I've got a reservation with you. You've moved and I can't find you. Can you please help? So yeah, you got to be able to be prepared for logistical challenges like that, like your hostel disappears or it's not
on?
what you expected. I made the mistake of reserving this place for 3 weeks. And so after the
Mm,
first week, I'm like, yeah, I'm not very comfortable with this place. There's not enough bathrooms here for the number of guests that they have. It's just, they're very nice, accommodating, friendly people. It's like a family atmosphere, but I'm like, we need more bathrooms. The upstairs bathroom is kind of not so good. I should have reserved this place for only a week. So that was what I learned the hard way. If you're going to reserve a place you've never been, do it for a week. If the week one goes fine, then extend your reservation or you move on to somewhere else. So that's something I wanted to add. Thank you for asking that.
yeah. No, and thank you for sharing. I'll even add to that a little bit. Um, so you mentioned obviously even a week. I would even say at least for any place, obviously if you don't know it, or you know, because even if it has good reviews wherever you're looking it up, for whatever reason you might actually get there and it just might not be for whatever reason it might not match, and
Yeah.
usually that's not the case, but that can happen as well. So I'm actually of the thought, at least for somewhere that somewhere new I haven't been as far as a hostel, I would actually book it for maybe, and it depends on the time of the year. Like if it's a busier season, then keep that in mind. But I would book for maybe 2 or 3 days tops. That way you get, I think that's enough time where you actually get a good feel. And then
Yeah.
from there, rather, then you can kind of commit more if you choose, right? Because even a week, and it's still not bad, but sometimes, you're still locked in for the 7 days or whatever it be. So I would say, depending
Yeah,
on the
that's true.
situation, 2 or 3 days even, and then from there you can figure things out for sure. But again,
Yeah.
definitely depends on the season. If it's tricky and you don't see it's easy to find a place for an extended period of time, and then you get that time, then sure. But yeah, kind of gauge it how it is, and but definitely don't. I did a mistake, and actually, now you bring it up, and me, I've traveled so much. I went to a place in Taiwan, and I saw it had really great reviews. Same sort of thing, like 95 plus, perfect. Booked a week, but once I got there, it wasn't. It was actually a place that was. It was labeled as a hostel, but it was actually a lot of people who were living there long term, which is totally
Mm.
fine. But unfortunately, a lot because of that, a lot of the people there weren't very social. So it probably wasn't until about the fourth day that I really had a cool conversation with somebody that was staying there, who also happened to be more of a traveler. So just for a real example of why I would say better to do a shorter period, get a feel for it, and then commit longer if it works, or just move on if it doesn't. So very good point for
Yeah.
bringing that up. Thank you for that.
Yeah. No, yeah. I can't argue against what you're saying. 2 or 3 nights should be enough to realize, okay, Is this going to be just a nightmare of a place, or is it going to be nice? It really depends on what your needs are. I'm an introvert, so I'm not the most social person. I'm trying to take care of business as I'm traveling. So my most important things are bathrooms need to be clean, the bed needs to be nice and warm and comfortable, the Wi-Fi needs to be strong and reliable. Kitchens, I prefer a larger kitchen compared to a smaller kitchen. I don't like doing the reach around with a total stranger, or having to work around somebody, or just having to wait until they're done with the kitchen. So that's, yeah, good. Big kitchen, strong Wi-Fi, clean bathroom, and a nice, comfortable, warm bed, and hot showers. I don't like taking cold showers. So I know what my now through this experience. Now I know what my hostile deal breakers are. So you've got
Mm.
to figure that out for yourself. I mean, a 20-year-old backpacker has different deal breakers than I do. That's just the fact.
Very true. Very true. Okay, let's do our full transition now into our main travel topic. So, being an empty nest single parent abroad. Of course, you can take this wherever you'd like, right? In general. But first, I'll ask you, in your situation, what were some fears or doubts that came up when you first considering leaving the U.S. At this stage in your life?
Well, the first one being my son. He's in his early 20s. He's in a transitional phase of his life. Getting, sprouting his own wings. I remember being in my early 20s and how hard it was to adjust from being a college student to being a professional. I stumbled quite a bit in my early career. My son, I'm super thankful to this day that he has a stepfather who is close. He's close to, emotionally close to, and geographically close to. In fact, my son had to move out of Tucson. And so I had told my son, I'm sorry this is happening. The only thing I could do for you is put you up here in Guadalajara locally for a few weeks. I'd be happy to do that if you need somewhere to go. Otherwise, you need to make some phone calls. Your mother, your stepfather, your friends, your grandparents. You need to build a network that you can rely on. I can't be your only option anymore. I'm committed to staying abroad. I'm looking for a job here. I said, if you have nowhere to go, I'd be happy to put you up for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and then that'll give you time to figure out your next plan. So yeah, he was going through some employment struggles. I'll just leave it at that. Luckily, his stepfather came down from Phoenix to Tucson and moved my son to Phoenix and put him up at my son's stepdad has a friend who owns homes, and so he was able to rent a room out to my son. And my son is living in a room on a week to week basis, and he got a job. He got himself a job. He's getting back on his feet. So I'm very thankful that my son has his stepfather. My son's biological mom, she's living in a group home and can't help him at all, really. Um, so yeah, it's important for your adult children to have somebody to rely upon if they can't rely on you because you're abroad. I got my son a passport after he moved in with me in 2023 since he didn't want to go to college. I said, all right, look, you need to get a job, and I'm also going to get you a passport. I'll pay for it, but I want you to get a passport for a couple of reasons. One, to visit me when I live abroad. Two, if there's a nationwide emergency and you want to leave the country, you're going to wish you had a passport. So I'm getting it for you for that reason. Also, the real ID thing. An ordinary state driver's license has to be real ID compliant. Otherwise, you're not getting on that plane, even for a domestic flight. So I said, so you'll be able to get on a domestic flight if you want to fly to Texas, if you want to go to Texas again, or wherever you want to go in the US on a plane, you'll need a passport card or a passport book to do it. So I'm footing the bill, but please do these things. Get your passport photos taken, fill out the forms, and then go to the passport acceptance facility, go there in person, pay for it, and submit all the papers to get your passport. So I paid for it, but he did all the legwork, and so he's thankful. He said, "Thank you for doing that." So um, apart from my son, concerns of, yeah, how long is it going to take me to get a job? I've got money, but it's not going to last forever. So sometimes losing sleep at night over running out of money and being deported back to an unstable country, broke. You can imagine being returned to the United States without a home, without a job, without a car, nothing but a storage unit. So yeah, that's another big fear of mine. Worried, about my son, adulting and finding his way on his own. Money
Mhm.
concerns, and also watching the news, realizing the government is unstable. You have these roving bands of ICE agents taking U.S. citizens into custody and not even arresting them. I said, geez, this is crazy. I left the United States. It was one country. Now I'm back and it's something else. So
Mhm.
yeah, those are three big concerns of mine that are sticking with me.
Got you. And you said, yeah, you sold most of your things, and you mentioned a storage unit as well.
Right. I sold my before I moved to Mexico. I sold my car. I got some money for that I used to live on. Downsized a lot of my possessions. I used to have a 5 foot by 10 foot storage unit. I downsized to a 5 by 5 unit. Raised $250 that way, and I cut my monthly storage bill from $80 a month down to 20. So for every person who's worried about financing, their travels, sell your stuff. You're not going to need it. You're not going to want it when you move abroad. If there's something you really need to acquire, you can get it in the new country, most likely. So sell your stuff, raise the money that will buy you a passport and a plane ticket easily.
Definitely. And it actually kind of goes into this a little bit. What when you did the move and even planning towards the move, what was more freeing than you expected?
What was more freeing? Downsizing, definitely going from a 5 by 10 to a 5 by 5. I said, I want to keep the storage because it's very inexpensive. $20 a month is nothing. Um, Plus, I'm not going to be gone from the United States forever. I'm not going to renounce my citizenship. I've thought about it, but no, I want to keep my citizenship and call Tucson, Arizona my home in the US, as well as I've got family here in Phoenix. Um, so the most freeing things are being able to move to Mexico and being given 180 days on entry. That's not a guarantee anymore, but if you've been out of Mexico for long enough and you fly in, chances are you'll get the 180 days, that's a long time. Having my passport, having my teaching certificate, having a place to call home 6 months of the year, Mexico, Belize even is a great option. Although you get 30 days on entry, and at the end of the 30 days, you need to go to immigration. You pay them $100. They'll give you another 30 days in your passport. And if you could do that every month for the first 12 months, then at that point you become eligible for permanent residency in Belize. So you can become a Belize permanent resident after 12 months. You do a police check and a health check and some paperwork, and you'll have a home in Belize as a resident. And once you've been a permanent resident of Belize for 5 years, you can become eligible for citizenship. So Mexico and Belize are two pathways. Guatemala is nice. They give you 90 days on entry. Um, but for me, my secret is get a passport, have some cash savings, and have a plan on how you're going to support yourself when you move to the new country. For me, that's teaching English, and now my YouTube. I'm about, I'd say, 90 days away from being monetized. By April or May, I should start getting ad revenue on. Yeah, I didn't think this was possible. I literally put YouTube as a hobby. I said, you know what? I'm sick and tired of throwing spaghetti at the wall and trying to figure out what works. I need to get a job. That's my top priority, getting a job.
Sure.
And then I had a one video that was like an accidental success because I apparently pissed off a bunch of Mexican locals in my video, and that drove a lot of engagement, a lot of traffic. Then my videos started exploding. I'm like, what is this? Wow, I wasn't expecting this at all. And now I'm putting out more content on YouTube more regularly, and my watch hours are going up. My subscriber count is increasing every day. I'm at the point where I'm approaching 500 subscribers and 3,000 watch hours. And when that happens, you could start selling memberships. You could have people just give you small cash donations. And then once you hit the next plateau of 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, you're eligible for ad revenue on your videos. I said, wow, this is actually happening. I call it a happy accident, but my YouTube is my happy accident. That's going to start generating some revenue down the road this by the spring of this year, according to my calculations. So, yeah, for three freeing things: a passport, cash, a plan to earn money, whether that's a teaching certificate or something else entirely. But those three things are giving me freedom that I want.
That's awesome. And congratulations on the success with YouTube as well, by the way.
Thank you.
That's sort of, I know you said earlier you kind of waited a bit. You were doing content before and then kind of paused and started again. So it's sort of
Yeah.
it kind of matches well with just a sense of taking action with that in general and then traveling as well. So you can see the success as it goes. So awesome. Um, as far as this specific group, so uh, empty single parent empty nesters, why do you feel this group in particular needs guidance specifically with living abroad or trying to create that lifestyle?
I say it's because they're being faced with a couple of challenges. One, never having moved abroad or lived abroad before. Maybe they've done a weekend in Mexico, but they've never lived in a foreign country before. So that's the first challenge. Two, you've got an adult child who might be struggling to find his or her own way in the world, especially now with we're looking at an economic recession. The job market numbers are worse. The worst we've had in terms of job creation since January of 2009. So that's a huge challenge for Gen Z and the younger folks, just finding meaningful, gainful employment. That's enough to make any parent worry a lot about their kids. So what I teach is how to get abroad in the first place and how to stay in touch with your adult kids. My son and I, we use Facebook Messenger for phone calls. We message each other on Instagram pretty much every day. He shares reels with me, and I share things with him. So we stay in touch over Instagram and call each other over Facebook Messenger. Um, he doesn't have WhatsApp, and he doesn't really need it. Um, but yeah, the main challenges are, getting abroad and staying in touch with your adult kid or kids while you're abroad. Those are my two main areas of teaching. I offer a 15-minute free consult through my website, spendchannel.com. You just go to the contact page. You can get 15 minutes of my time for free. I'm happy to get to know the other person on the other end. I also offer a 60 to 90-minute clarity call, where I would work with him or her and help them build their own personalized escape plans. Like, all right, these are the things you need to do and do them, I recommend, in this sequence. And for that 60 to 90-minute call, I'm selling that for $195 because that's the same price it's going to cost you to get your passport book, your passport card, and then the application fee. That's all 195 bucks. I figure that's a fair price for a 90-minute call.
Gotcha. Yeah, we won't share all the sauce here, but I'll ask a few more with that in particular. And also, I don't I know we're kind of getting close to the 90 minutes. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So hopefully it's 10 more minutes or so, okay? Do you have the time?
That's fine.
Yeah. Gotcha. And I actually have to jump on another call soon, but I don't obviously want to rush you off or anything as well. But um, with with this group as well, what do you feel like people in this situation, so single parent, empty nesters, what do you feel like they tend to complicate or over complicate the most, if that makes sense?
I see a lot of comments on social media, on YouTube or Facebook. Passports are expensive. Not really. No. I mean, you need at least a passport book. That's 130, and then to apply is $35. So 165 is the minimum cost, and that you're good to go for 10 years. That's a 10-year investment. 165. It just blows my mind that people are saying passports are expensive, but you're holding a $1,000 smartphone in your hand that you use to type this out. How are you able to get a smartphone for $1,000 or $700? I don't get it. I mean, I think it's psychological. The biggest barrier to moving abroad is psychological. You tell yourself, "Oh, passports are expensive. How am I going to afford a passport?" Or "There's nowhere else to go." I say, "Bullocks." There's over 50 countries on this earth that have English as one of their official languages. Not just the UK, not just Australia, not just Canada. You've got more options than you think of where to go. The main challenge is making your income portable because you can't just take a local job when you move to another country. You'd be taking a job away from a local, and that's not fair to the country. So you need to get a work visa. So the best advice is get your darn passport already. It's good for 10 years. You won't have to worry again for a decade. Start selling your things, and whatever money you make by selling your stuff, open it up, put it in a Charles Schwab bank account. So that way, that's your quote international bank account. And do not use this money for anything. Literally, start stashing your cash away in Charles Schwab checking account. You'll use that for your travels. And also research visa options. You need to figure out, if you're not a retiree, you need to figure out, okay, how am I going to work abroad? Either getting a local job with a work visa. So you need to research work visa options, what kind of job you would do abroad. English teaching is one, but not the only option. So yeah, passport, decluttering, money, and work visas. Those are the main concerns those are the main areas of focus for anybody who wants to do what I'm doing.
Got you. Yeah. Shout out to Charles Schwab as well. I know they're one of the friendliest travel type cards as well. So
Yes.
good call out for that one for sure. Um,
Yeah.
got you. So big picture then, I guess two things, two-part question, I guess, but uh and you can again, I don't want you to give out all the sauce if it's something that you kind of go into more on your consulting, but what do you feel like people get wrong about living abroad later in life? And then also, what would you say to someone who feels like they've sort of missed their chance?
Well, unless you're you've got terminal cancer, you're undergoing cancer treatment, or you're taking care of an elderly person, you haven't missed your chance of moving abroad. I did it at 50. You could do this at 60. You could do this at 70 or 75 years old. As long as you're physically capable of moving, you could probably pull this off, and you don't have any major responsibilities at home, like minor children. If you're the single parent of one or more minor children, you not only need to get your child a passport, but you need to get a notarized letter from the other parent giving you permission to take your kid or your kids out of the country, and that's going to be a hard sell. So there's that. The thing that people get wrong, yeah, just because you've got a tourist visa doesn't automatically give you permission to work. You certainly can't take a local job within the country. That would be violating the terms of your visa, and you can get deported for that. Also, you could work for a remote. You could work for your U.S. based employer while you're living abroad, but it's not that cut and dried. For some countries, you need to get a digital nomad visa or maybe a work visa, or certain countries will tolerate it if you do this on a tourist visa, but you have to figure that out ahead of time before you get there. Also, you need to let your employer know, hey, I'd like to live in Mexico and continue working for you. But that's something you're going to have to sell to your employer. What's in it for them? Because you got tax complications. You might run the risk of being double taxed if you're in the U.S. half the year and in Mexico half the year. You would end up being a tax resident of two countries. So that's something you need to work out with your accountant. Definitely get an expat friendly accountant to help you sort out the tax issues. Um, there's another thing called the FEIE, Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, where if you're abroad for at least 330 days a year and you earn less than 120,000 a year from a foreign country, then you won't have to pay U.S. federal income taxes on that income. So that's one thing you could utilize to avoid being double taxed. I'm going to be doing that myself once I'm abroad for enough time. And as a teacher in Vietnam, I'll be earning way less than 120,000 a year. That won't be a problem. But things that people get wrong, make sure you don't get the wrong visa, and make sure you understand the tax implications of moving abroad. Those are probably the best advice items on that note.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Okay. So with this, is there anything else you'd like to add, or are you ready to move on?
Yeah, one more thing to add. Definitely, it's worth living abroad is definitely worth pursuing. It makes you a more interesting person. You gain a lot of skills. You learn to be more flexible. You learn about the things that stressed you out about the United States won't be a thing in another country, but you'll be acquiring a new set of challenges living in Mexico or Vietnam or Guatemala, whatever it is. You've got to adjust to their culture, their way of life. They're not going to bend to you. That's not realistic at all. But even if things don't work out for you as a U.S. citizen, you can't be denied reentry into your own country. As long as you don't renounce your U.S. citizenship, you're cleared to come back anytime you want. It's you're not a failure as a person if it doesn't work for you overseas. Um, USA will always be your home base. You can always come back and regroup, but you're going to want to have some money in the bank before that happens. You don't want to come back to your home country completely broke. Where are you going to go? That would be the problem. So if you got, 5 grand or more, that might be the signal to come back to the US and find someone to live with and find some way to earn income while you're in the US, while you have a right to work there, an unconditional right to work in the US as a citizen that you don't have in another country. So that's that. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you can always come back.
Definitely true. I've done that many times myself as well. So you can always hit the
Absolutely.
reset button for sure. All right,
Yeah.
awesome. So we're actually almost at the end of the interview. But first, I want to ask you a few just random rapid fire questions, and then you'll have 30
Go
seconds of
ahead.
glory to share what you have. So as far as our rapid fire questions, first question, uh, you mentioned you've seen Fleetwood Mac live 5 times. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you, what's your top three Fleetwood Mac songs?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's not an easy one to answer, but oh, crap. Oh man, I'm blanking out. You got the popular ones like The Chain. Little Lies is a great tune. That's from 1988, I believe. Their album, the 1997 album, The Dance, is a really good one. I have favorite albums. The Dance is great. Their greatest hits album from 1988. That's what got me into the band in the first place. Their 1975 album that was self-titled. I discovered this through my parents. See, when I was a kid, I was raised on the Eagles, and then when I was about 15 or 16, I discovered Fleetwood Mac, and I said I like them better. So that's sort of an answer to your question. What's the next question?
Awesome. And then finally, coming back to the lessons I've learned from Star Wars, which I mentioned much earlier,
Mhm.
what's the one lesson you can think, or that you think could be most useful for others, travel related or not?
Oh, it's been so long since I wrote that article. I'd have to read it again, but My most important lesson about traveling, I'll just speak in generalities. Um, yeah, definitely adapt to the culture, adapt to the language, adapt to everything. Especially if you're looking at becoming a legal resident and living and working there for 6 months or more. You definitely need to focus on cultural sensitivity and cultural adaptation more than anything else. Especially now that the United States is becoming less and less popular around the world with all the our imperialistic aggression. I'll just call it that. Especially, be as friendly and as culturally as aware and sensitive as you could possibly be. That's the best advice.
Awesome. All right. You did it, Jason. We've come to the end of the interview, and now it's time for 30 seconds of glory. So you have the floor. Share what you have going on, or share some more words of wisdom if you like.
All right. Well, my website is spendchannel.com, SPEND channel.com. You can learn all there is to know about me. I have links to my YouTube channel, a contact form. I also have a store where I'm selling an ebook about legalizing your teaching credentials for Vietnam. That's for obviously for U.S. citizens who are TEFL certified or CELTA certified. They want to live and work in Vietnam. This is not how to get a job. This is how to get your papers ready. That's the first step. Got to get your paperwork ready for Vietnam before you show up and start job hunting. So there's that. My YouTube channel, my handle is The Spend Channel, just at The Spend Channel on YouTube. Um, and yeah, stay tuned. My journey continues in 8 days from now. I'm on a plane to Vancouver for 8 nights there. And then on the 22nd, I'm on my way to Vietnam. And now I've got 90 days there to make it happen. And if for some reason I don't land a job in the first 90 days, I'll exit to Thailand for a week or so and then come back to Vietnam for another 90 days and give it another shot. I want to exhaust all my Vietnam options before I try Thailand as a teaching destination. So, yeah, lots of exciting things to come. Stay tuned for more.
So there it is. Thanks again to Jason for joining me today and sharing some tips and insight. If you'd like to connect with him and learn more, check out his website, spendchannel.com, or subscribe to his YouTube at The Spend Channel. So now, there were some things there that Jason brought up as far as staying at a place and kind of assimilating to where you are, wherever that country is. And also the idea of being able to start at any age, maybe reinvent yourself as well when it comes to travel. So kind of want to spend a little bit talking on those two things. So as far as adjusting and assimilating to a new place, if you plan to be there long term, whether you're living there or going to be based there for an extended amount of time, why is that different than just visiting through, and why is it important to kind of acclimate to how things are in that area? I feel like, especially just going off of my experience, obviously being based in Thailand and other places for a while, but obviously I was in Bangkok for 2 years or so and been going for longer than that. I think anywhere that you are, even if you happen to be there for a long time, years, I think at the end of the day, whether it's a bad thing or good thing, you always have to remember you're still at the end of the day a guest in someone else's country, right? So if it's not your home country, again, you might be there for a long time. You might, obviously, hopefully develop close friendships with people there that are locals, but outside of that circle, potentially you're still a guest to that place. So ultimately, I think you should always keep that in mind wherever you are, and just remember that. It's very easy to get maybe a little bit too comfortable in a place, which hopefully you do, I guess, but to a certain extent. But you have to remember to, if you do something that isn't great, you could be asked to leave said country. So always keep that in mind ultimately. But as far as some of the intricacies, I suppose, just from the idea when you first get to somewhere new and making the adjustments, remembering that, you might not have the things that where you are now compared to your hometown, wherever you were before, and that you'll have to make those adjustments, right? So anything from food, there might be things where you are that you won't get back home, and you have to learn to be okay with that. That said, ultimately, I think a lot of things, depending on where you are, especially if you're in or closer to a bigger city, you still will be able to find a lot of those things that you've probably had back home, which is fine. That said, a lot of those things might still be very similar to prices back home, depending on where you are. But, get accustomed at least to the offerings that are in the city that you're in or place that you're in currently abroad. So I feel it's just obviously one way to connect with the place that you are. Same thing with cultural norms, right? So anything from all the things you can think of, even if you're going shopping at a place. I'll again use Thailand as an example. There's many places or situations rather where the concept of bargaining is very much accepted. Where somewhere back in the States, for example, you don't necessarily go into a market or a shop and try to bargain the price. Where again, a lot of places in Thailand or in Asia, wherever it be, it's expected to do that depending on where you are. But that said, at the same time, also be mindful as well, places there where you shouldn't be bartering. So a restaurant, for example, it's not custom to do that there. So understand what the boundaries are with that as well overall, depending on where you go, just different norms and things like that. Sometimes it's maybe learned the hard way, but again, hopefully you learn from that and you're able to grow from that. So keep those sort of things in mind when you're planning to go somewhere new and be based there for a while. In that realm, same thing as well for customer service potentially, where you are compared to your hometown. Things might be different. It might necessarily be worse or better, just different ultimately in a lot of different areas. So just be mindful of that. Learn those things as you go wherever you are, which kind of goes into the whole idea with being flexible and being able to adapt as well, right? So I feel it's definitely important to you don't have to change everything, but definitely learn to be adaptable again and take the opportunity to be open-minded and assimilate more into how things go wherever it is that you are, compared to wherever you were coming from or wherever home was before. Some practical ways to do that, of course, learn a little bit, some helpful phrases in the local language, whatever that would be. You don't have to know all the things, but a few simple phrases can definitely go a long way, or even just a word here and there can go a long way. You don't necessarily have to know all the phrases as you're starting. So another way, ultimately, maybe adjusting your routines. I think it's as an expat or just someone who's traveling, it's very easy to get into that expat or traveler bubble, if you will, and ultimately not necessarily interact with the locals often. Find opportunities where you're able to interact with native locals, and maybe from there you can learn some of those things as far as the customs that maybe aren't as easy to pick up on doing your own thing or being in those circles. So for example, back in the interview, I know Jason mentioned different meetup groups, WhatsApp, things like that. Ask around, try to, if not look it up online, ask around and see what sort of things are available if it's not something already advertised. So, and really just take your time, slow it down, and you'll figure it out in time, more than likely. But as far as being able to start at any age or kind of reinvent yourself, I know Jason said he's in his 50s, and he started traveling in his 40s. I started mid 20s at the time. I've personally met people 30s traveling for the first time, and people in their 70s, 60s. So it doesn't really matter the age. I guess it is more about timing, but also taking the time to do it. And obviously everyone's story is different, right? So I know this 70-year-old gentleman that I met, or gentleman in his 70s, he had sold a home and decided to travel for an extended period of time. So he's not necessarily, he hasn't necessarily moved to another place to slow down, but he's definitely had a few bases here and there, depending on where he's gone, or just, stayed a couple months at a time and really just done slow traveling versus trying to live in a place. But regardless of how you do it, whether you're planning to move somewhere else to a different country or just, again, slow travel, whatever it be, really, again, it's never too late. I know a lot of times that the idea of doing travels in general, if it's not, vacation or family related, is just, maybe take a gap year when you're younger, or is geared towards younger people. Take a gap year before doing school, or as society puts it, doing it after you're retired, you've done the 9 to 5 or whatever it is, and then you start at that age, which again is totally fine too, regardless of how you go about it. But You don't have to feel like you've missed your window, whatever that is. Whether you're in your 60s or 70s, or you feel like you're maybe stuck or need to be committed to the 9 to 5 grind, so to speak. You can always find. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be an extravagant sort of trip where you're gone for months at a time. Even if you do something nearby, make the most of the time that you have, and just do it. And then obviously, I know Jason was talking about being a teacher. There's different ways to do it when it comes to maybe traveling for work or work for travel. I don't want to get too much into that right now, but that's obviously another option you can explore. There's more than just teaching. Again, I worked on the cruise ships, working with kids and all that. So there's some people maybe who work on resorts, doing hospitality related type things. So if that's something that kind of fits your wheelhouse, so to speak, that's something you can explore as well. But many different avenues to go about it. Just have to figure it out and what works for you, and then make it happen if that's something you really want to do. So with that, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop some below, or feel free to reach out. backpackersociety20@gmail.com. Thanks again to Jason for joining me today. Thank you for listening. And until next time, be well.